morning, good afternoon, good evening. Zimbabwe is being sucked into this political situation where we seem to be going round and round in circles and getting absolutely nowhere. This issue of ED 2030, Zanu PF is thrown it in the ring for the purposes of diverting the people's attention from the real battle, which is to finally implement the democratic reforms to ensure free, fair, and credible elections. The nation has failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections for 45 years. That is a long time. The country is a failed state because for the last 45 years, we've been stuck with a corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical regime. Anyone with any brain would be asking, are you saying that in those 45 years, you've had no opportunity to end the Zanu-PF dictatorship? The honest answer is we have had many opportunities to end the dictatorship, but we've wasted them all. Notably, during the 2008 to 2013 GNU, Government of National Unity. That was the opportunity for the country to implement the democratic reforms, which would have ended the Zanu-PF dictatorship. Where we are being sucked with this ED 2030 is actually where we don't want to go. Zanu-PF has thrown this in for the purposes of confusing the ordinary people. Zanu-PF does not want the people to look at this problem, 45 years of rigged elections. Let's end it. They don't want you to do that. So they've constantly draw your attention away from that. ED 2030 was introduced a few weeks, in fact, after the 2023 elections. Some people were asking, he has just been elected. He still has got the 5 years to serve. So why is he now talking of extending his stay in power beyond 2028? He threw that in because he did not want the nation to discuss the just ended 2023 elections. Both SADC and the AU election observers condemned those election process as flawed and illegal. That is what their report said. But before the nation could even discuss it, Mnangagwa was already throwing into the ring the prospect that he would extend his rule beyond 2028. And as expected, many of the opposition and the supporters took that up. They were fighting over that. That has become the big issue, when in reality, the nation should have been talking about if SADC in the AU said the 2023 elections were not free, fair, and credible, then Mnangagwa and his ZANU-PF regime, they're illegitimate. That is what the people should have been talking about. But after that bone was thrown at them, all that was forgotten. It's interesting to note how the opposition are getting all very excited about this 2030. Even some of the opposition, like Monzora, whom many people, at least in the 2023 elections, he didn't feature at all, seemed to be re-energized. He's talking of how he's going to fight to stop the ED 2030 bandwagon. One of the other leaders, Jameson Timber, he too has been re-energized. Here, in one of these latest clips, he is giving his view on that very matter.
Fellow citizens, Newsday now confirms what Zimbabweans have long suspected. ZANU-PF leaders are openly mobilizing to extend President Mnangagwa's term of office to 2030. They want Parliament to change the Constitution, and they want citizens to treat a referendum as a loyalty test. But our Constitution is clear. A sitting president cannot benefit from a change to term limits. This safeguard protects the nation from the abuse of power. No development comes from breaking the law. Zimbabwe's progress depends on citizens, not political elites, defending the Constitution.
So he is mobilizing to stop ED 2030. Is this really where the fight is? One is got to ask. Here is Tendai Biti explaining the process of amending that constitution, which ZANU-PF is suggesting. And the emphasis here from Tendai Biti is that it cannot be done.
That is to say, 2/3 in the National Assembly and 2/3 in the Senate. It must then go to a referendum, because it is a bill altering term limits in the country. The referendum is a simple process, Baba. The referendum simply asks whether you are saying yes or no. Because we are going to campaign and live in the mountains to get that no vote. There's a second problem. The Constitution then says, when you change this Constitution and you remove the term limits, it doesn't benefit the incumbent.
It benefits the next.
It benefits the next. But you can change that provision.
Same process.
Yeah, we call it the Abdoulaye Wade provision. because President Abdullahi Wade amended the constitution for a third time, and Senegalese said it can't benefit you, and he lost at that stage. And that's why President Sall came in, and as fat as Yazid, as you know, President Macky Sall also tried to change the constitution to benefit him. Yet he came through a process of rejecting a third term agenda. Right. That's why you can't trust people. But anyway, to come back to the legal process, another referendum is required now to change the constitutional provision that says you can't benefit. That's when you will see Trababalan's true colors, because all along you'll be saying, I don't want Vandova Akuda. Now when he says, now the Akuda, the constitution has to go to a referendum for the second time. Baba, pakaipa. Tusangana makomo, tusangana kwa Chendabwe, tusangana ku Lotito, tusangana ku Escodini, tusangana ku Binga, tusangana ku Cholocho. He can't win those referendums. He cannot win those referendums.
Okay.
So to put it very crudely, the idea of a third term agenda is fraught with such legal landmines that you would have to be so ambitious, so insane, so drunk, or both to ever think that it can actually carry out and see the light of the day.
I'll take Tendai Bitu on that point. If Mnangagwa has got to be so drunk and crazy to think he can push this one through, then one has got to ask, why is he doing it? And it comes back to the argument I was making earlier on. This is not the fight that Mnangagwa is really interested in. This is the diversion. He would rather fight this referendum issue than fight about implementing democratic reforms to finally ensure that elections are free, fair, and credible. Because he knows that fight, he has absolutely no chance. As for the referendum, changing the constitution to extend his rule, it is of little consequence in reality. Because at the end of the day, he can still say, I've always said I'm a constitutionalist, I don't want it. And turn around and announce that whoever is trying to persuade him, he doesn't want it. And meanwhile, we've all been spending our time and effort fighting to stop him. But the other thing that must also be considered here is, as much as Tendai Biti says it cannot be done, I don't think that is being realistic. We are talking here of a regime that staged an electoral coup in 2008, that staged a military coup in 2017, and as we all know, this referendum is a yes or no vote. Zanu PF has absolute control in the rural areas. Tonight it is talking of Tosangana in the rural areas and fight. In the rural areas, everybody knows that the opposition is a no-go area for them. So if Zanu PF truly wanted this, they would get it. But this is not the fight that we should be involved in. We should draw ZANU-PF to the fight we really want, and the fight we've always wanted. In fact, the reason why the opposition was elected is to fight to implement democratic reforms to stop ZANU-PF rigging elections. That is the area we want to fight. But ever since our friend Tendai Biti and his colleagues failed to implement even one token reform during the GNU, they've all but given up on that fight. Ever since the end of the 2008 to 2013 GNU, Tendai Biti and company have not talked about implementing reforms. Whenever they've talked about it, they've just paid lip service to it. They've done absolutely nothing. In some cases, as we know, in 2018 and then 2023, they've even been campaigning that they've devised ways of winning rigged elections. In other words, forget about implementing reforms, we will still win. The reality of that is that that was a lie. MDC CCC leaders who have given up on implementing reforms and have been participating in flawed elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed, knowing fully well that ZANU-PF was rigging, and knowing fully well that by participating, they're giving the process legitimacy. But they have continued to do it because they wanted a share of the gravitrans seats. What we are seeing here is just another excuse for the opposition to participate in 2028 with no reforms implemented. They'll be telling their supporters that we are fighting to protect the Constitution, to stop Mnangagwa amending the Constitution. When they know that by participating in that process, they will also be participating in the flawed 2028 elections. That is where ZANU-PF want them to participate. I've said it on this platform, and I'll state it again. SADC and the AU condemned Zimbabwe's 2023 elections. They said the process was flawed and illegal. But they could not go the extra mile and deny ZANU-PF political legitimacy. Why? Because Nelson Chamisa had managed to persuade 2 million of his supporters to participate. This point has been made several times. If you participate, you give the process legitimacy. That point cannot be ignored. If you participate, you give the process legitimacy. So if we participate in 2028, albeit under the disguise that we are stopping Mnangagwa amending the Constitution, we will have given the process legitimacy. And that is exactly what ZANU-PF wants. Let's consider for 1 minute. If the opposition had not sold out, if they'd implemented the democratic reforms during the GNU, when they had the golden opportunity to do so. We are looking at from 2013, elections would have been free, fair, and credible. We would not be where we are. We would not have the Zanu-PF dictatorship still. But even if we put that one and say it's water under the bridge, they failed to implement reforms. MDC leaders, Tendai BT and company, would have redeemed themselves if they'd listened to SADC's advice in 2013, who said to them, do not participate in these flawed elections without implementing reforms. They didn't listen. They participated. Not only in 2013, they did the same thing again in 2018 and repeated the same thing again in 2023. If they had not participated in 2023, like I said, SADC's report and the AU report condemned the process. I think, and I believe SADC would have had the guts to go the extra mile and deny Zanu-PF legitimacy. If we do not participate in the flawed 2028 elections, somehow manage to stop the so-called Chamisa Chete Chete Brigade being conned into participating in yet another flawed process, Zanu-PF will be denied political legitimacy. We'll be back to where we were in 2008, when Zanu-PF was denied political legitimacy. Mugabe and Zanu-PF only agreed to go into the GNU because both SADC and the AU had refused to grant the regime political legitimacy. If that was to happen in 2028, the consequences of that would be that the Zanu-PF dictatorship has been dismantled. Even if Mnangagwa had managed to force Parliament, the present Parliament, to amend the Constitution, force through the referendums, to allow him to extend his stay in power beyond 2028, if the parliamentary elections in 2028 do not get political legitimacy, the Zanu-PF dictatorship will collapse. Mnangagwa cannot survive without the backing of the dictatorship. Dictators are like fish. They need water to survive. Dictators need the dictatorship itself to survive. So if the nation is forced to go into a new GNU, the new GNU means the Zanu-PF dictatorship does not exist at that point. In the 2008 to 2018, Mugabe was president, but he wasn't the dictator that he was if it was been a Zanu-PF government. The MDC guys failed to implement reforms during that period, not because Zanu-PF or Mugabe coerced them, used dictatorial powers to coerce them to do anything. All Mugabe did was bribe them. He gave them the trappings of high office, and they forgot about the reforms. That's nothing to do with being a dictator. He did not have the dictatorial powers. He bribed them. That's different. We should not be wasting our time and effort fighting this phony war of ED 2030. Let Mugabe win it, Mnangagwa win it if that's what he wants to fight. Let's concentrate on fighting to make sure that it's either 2028 elections are free, fair, and credible. If they are not, that people do not participate and give the regime legitimacy. That is the war we should be fighting. We have got to be aware that our friends in the MDC CCC have failed to get any meaningful democratic reforms implemented. And that is why they've given up on that fight. They are welcoming this phony war because it gives them an excuse for participating in 2028 with no reforms implemented. And if we are foolish enough to believe that that is where the fighting has got to take place, and we participate and we give the process legitimacy, we only have ourselves to blame once again. The number one issue before this country is to end the case of rigged elections. So far, we are looking at 45 years of rigged elections. We should not make it 48 years of rigged elections because we made the mistake of participating in the 2028 elections under the guise that we are fighting to stop Mnangagwa amending the constitution. I repeat, even if he did amend the constitution, if ZANU-PF does not win political legitimacy in 2028, Mnangagwa will just be a dictator with no dictatorship to support him. He'll be a fish out of water. We need to be smarter. Think about it. Thank you very much. Good evening.